Some people pack everything they own into a car and drive toward a city they've never seen. They chase new jobs, new faces, and a life that looks nothing like the one they grew up in. And then there are the ones who stay. Not because life beat them, not because they ran out of options, but because something invisible, something buried deep in the human brain, is holding them in place. Researchers have spent decades studying this exact phenomenon, and what they found completely changes the way this choice looks from the outside. Staying in your hometown is not simply a decision. It is a psychological event. And the science behind why so many Americans never leave is far more complex than anyone wants to admit. The numbers that stop you cold. More than 1 in 3 Americans has never lived outside the state where they were born. That figure comes from U.S. Census data, and it is bigger than most people expect from a country that practically invented the idea of reinventing yourself. But it goes deeper than state lines. A significant portion of those people have never left their hometown at all. Same streets, same stores, same zip code from birth to adulthood. And this is not limited to rural communities or small forgotten towns. It happens in suburbs outside major cities. It happens in neighborhoods inside those cities. It happens everywhere, across every income level, every background, every generation. From the outside, it is easy to attach a label to this. Comfortable, afraid, stuck. But psychology tells a completely different story, and that story starts inside the brain. Why the brain fights change. The human brain does not like the unknown. That is not an opinion. It is biology. There is a system in the brain that rewards familiarity. When a person sees a face they recognize, walks a route they have walked 100 times, or smells something connected to a childhood memory, the brain releases dopamine. That is the chemical tied to pleasure and comfort. The brain is essentially paying you for staying somewhere it already understands. Now think about growing up in the same place for 18 years. Every shortcut, every neighbor, every sound at night. The brain has cataloged all of it. That environment becomes part of the brain's internal map, and when someone considers leaving, the brain treats it like a threat. Not a metaphorical threat, a real one. The stress response activates, anxiety spikes, the mind starts generating reasons to stay. Psychologists call this the familiarity bias. The brain defaults to what it already knows because in human history, the unknown was where predators lived. That wiring helped early humans survive. Today, it is one of the main forces keeping millions of Americans inside city limits they have never crossed. Identity is geography. But brain chemistry is only part of the picture. There is something else at work, and it cuts even deeper. For a lot of people, their hometown is not just where they live, it is who they are. Their entire identity is tied to that place. The high school mascot, the local team, the church, the diner, the street corner where they grew up. Remove all of that and they do not just lose a location, they lose themselves. Psychologists have a name for this. It is called place identity. It refers to the part of a person's sense of self that is built around the place they come from. And research shows that people with strong place identity experience something close to grief when they think seriously about leaving for good. It is not being dramatic. It is a documented psychological response, similar to what people feel after losing a relationship or a job they loved. There is also a social layer on top of this that is rarely discussed. In many American towns, especially smaller ones, leaving is not seen as ambition. It is seen as rejection. The message, spoken or not, is clear. If you leave, you think you are better than everyone here. That pressure is invisible, but it is enormous. It shapes decisions in ways people never fully recognize until years later. The cost of leaving is real. Here is where the psychology gets sharper, and where a lot of people finally see themselves in this story. The human brain is wired to fear loss more than it craves gain. This is called loss aversion, and it is one of the most studied ideas in behavioral psychology. In simple terms, losing something feels roughly twice as painful as gaining something feels good. So when someone weighs leaving their hometown, the brain is not running a fair calculation. It is amplifying every single thing that would be left behind. The family down the street, the friend who shows up at midnight when something goes wrong, the parent who watches the kids for free. The landlord who has known the family for 20 years. The community that already accepts them without an application or an audition. In a new city, all of that is gone. Building it back from zero takes years. For working-class Americans especially, that support system is not a luxury. It is the difference between making it and not making it. Moving is not just emotionally hard, it is financially dangerous. And the brain runs those numbers whether a person asks it to or not. The big fish effect. Now here is the part of this conversation that almost never happens. Because most of the time, the people who stayed are too busy living their lives to defend their choice to anyone. There is a psychological concept called the big fish, small pond effect. Research shows that people who stay in familiar, smaller environments often end up with stronger confidence, clearer purpose, and deeper community connections than people who move to highly competitive cities and spend years feeling invisible. In a major city, a person might be one of thousands competing for the same apartment, the same role, the same social space. Back home, that same person might be the one who opens the business, runs the youth program, or becomes the most trusted name in their field within 50 miles. That sense of mattering, of being seen and known, is not a small thing. It is a major driver of long-term well-being. And the data on happiness backs this up. Across dozens of long-term studies, the single strongest predictor of life satisfaction is not income. It is not career achievement. It is not the city someone lives in. It is the quality of their relationships. And for a huge number of Americans, the strongest relationships they will ever have are the ones they were born into, right back where they started. When staying becomes a trap. But this is not a one-sided story. Because for some people, staying is not a choice at all. It is a slow drift that happens so quietly they never notice it until the door has already closed. Psychologists call this the comfort zone trap. The hometown stops being a source of strength and starts being a wall. The person who turns down the job interview because it requires relocating. The one who watches 5 years go by telling themselves next year will be different. The one who had every intention of leaving at 22 and woke up at 35 still waiting for the right moment. The right moment never announced itself. Research shows that people who feel trapped rather than rooted in their hometowns show significantly higher rates of anxiety, low motivation, and a condition called learned helplessness. That is when a person stops believing their actions can change their situation. They stop applying, stop reaching, stop expecting anything different, and the hometown becomes less of a home and more of a holding pattern. The gap between staying by choice and staying by default is one of the most important psychological distinctions a person can make about their own life. One is grounded, the other is frozen. And from the outside, they can look exactly the same. What the American dream got wrong. The story America tells about success has always had a very clear shape. You leave. You hustle somewhere new. You build something from nothing. And if you stayed, if you never chased the bigger city, the bigger salary, the bigger life, then the story says you did not really try. That story has caused real damage. It has told millions of people that a life built close to home is somehow less. That the person who stayed to care for aging parents made the wrong call. That the one who runs a small business in their hometown and coaches youth sports on weekends fell short of something. It frames every person who did not migrate as someone who got left behind rather than someone who made a deliberate choice. Psychologists are now pushing hard against that idea. Choosing depth over distance is a legitimate life strategy. Contentment is not the same as complacency. The relentless pressure to always be chasing something further away carries its own psychological cost. Rootlessness has consequences. A life spent always arriving somewhere new and never truly belonging anywhere takes a toll that does not show up on a resume but shows up everywhere else. The study that changed everything is staying in your hometown a wise choice or a quiet failure to choose at all. Researchers tracked 2 groups over 30 years, those who left their hometowns before 25 and those who stayed. They measured income, health, relationships, mental well-being, and, unusually, regret. The results contradicted what American culture has long insisted. The group that scored highest across nearly every measure wasn't who most people would predict. The findings showed that fulfillment has nothing to do with geography. The conditions that determine whether someone ends up fulfilled or hollowed out exist in hometowns just as often as in big cities. But the most striking finding wasn't who came out ahead. It was what the people on the losing side shared. Every one of them had made the same quiet, ordinary mistake, one most people never even notice they're making.